Welcome to Constitution Day at the Maryland Institute College of Art. My name is Furman Braybander, and I am the conference organizer for the college. This is our 8th annual Constitution Day Conference, which is becoming a veritable tradition at Mica. The conference has covered a wide range of compelling topics over the years, from voting rights to marriage equality to free speech in the digital age. And it has included such wonderful speakers as John Waters, Jesse Jackson, Dan Savage, Ralph Nader, Angela Davis, Amy Goodman, among others. I'm pleased that we have another thrilling installment for you all tonight, taking on the timely topic of freedom of assembly, so vividly highlighted in the Occupy Wall Street movement over the past year. I'd like to extend thanks to Dean Cindy Barr and to Alicia Green, and to John Lippitz and the Events Office for their support and assistance for the conference. Thanks to Ingrid Burrington for her design work in coordinating the speakers, and to the Department of Humanistic Studies for its support. Now I will turn it over to Susan Gehring from our co-sponsors for the conference, ACLU of Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I bring with me the hearty welcome of the ACLU. In addition to that, I want to take just a minute to thank Dr. Fred Lazarus for all of the work that he's done to make this possible. Now, Fred Lazarus has been amazing. He's built, physically built, a stunningly beautiful campus here. But almost as important, maybe more important from my perspective, is the community he's built. He has built a community of engaged social activist artists. And that explains in part why we're doing this tonight, this program tonight. This is the 6th annual Constitution Day event that the ACLU and the Maryland Institute College of Art have co-hosted. And it's been our absolute pleasure. So Fred, along with Furman, along with lots of students and staff members, have partnered with the ACLU to celebrate and really analyze the symbiotic role that artists and civil libertarians play in making the society a free and civil place to be. Now, this year's topic, the power of people in public spaces as a form of political protest, is, I think, particularly well suited to examining our diverse roles and the intersection of our respective roles. So when we think about it, there are a number of questions that occur to me. There's the one that is maybe the artist question. What substance until it takes form? Then there's the ACLU question. What's a plaza without people? And then there are the general questions like, what's a message without a movement? And how powerful is politics without the beat of drums, the singing of the singer, the chanter of the chanter, the poet, and the flicker of 1,000 candlelights at a nighttime demonstration? And the photographer who captures all that for our memories. So Fred, let's keep working together. Let's make sure that the artist can bring the metaphorical drums and the metaphorical candles, and the ACLU, for its part, will try our best to make absolutely sure that the public spaces, be they figurative or real, be they the internet or the plaza, are full, are rife with political speech and freedom of assembly. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
All right, how's everybody doing? Good. Good to see such a full house. Thank you all for being here. This is I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think a lot of you are as well. So we're going to get right down to it. I'll let you know just a few words here at the top of the program about our game plan here for the next couple of hours. We're going to begin by giving each of our 3 guest speakers an opportunity to take the podium individually here and share a few introductory thoughts with you. They're going to have 5-10 minutes to do that. And then we're going to give our guests a chance to sort of converse with each other in a moderated discussion up here on stage. I'll try and keep the conversation on track without interrupting too much. And then that'll go for about 40 minutes, and then we'll turn things over to you, the audience, for the last half hour of the program or so. And I want to let you know that you are invited to submit your questions and comments throughout the evening via some sort of technology that I now need to try and explain to you. Here's how this is going to work. I'm going to be handed an iPad device, which scares the daylights out of me, but I'll figure out how to use it. And you text your questions to 321-345 Mica, and then I'll read the questions. That's theoretically how it's supposed to work. We also have a wireless mic here, in case we have a technological failure. Failing that, you can all use Sharpies and note cards. So, we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. All right, so on to our speakers. Our first speaker is an American political activist who's been organizing for justice since 1975. Using nonviolent direct action, she's organized hundreds of events and demonstrations on a range of issues, from coordinating a shutdown of the Central Intelligence Agency headquarters in Langley, Virginia, to organizing with janitors, nursing home workers, and auto workers. She's used a wide range of strategies and tactics for social, economic, and environmental change. Please help me welcome Lisa Fithian.
Good evening, everyone, and how lucky am I to get to kick this off. Thank you very much to Mica, to the Maryland ACLU, and to all of you who come out. And I especially want to thank those of you who are the students here for coming out tonight, because I actually began my life service of exercising my First Amendment right to assemble when I was in high school and in college as well. And so one of the things I've seen over the years is that if we're ever going to make a change, it's going to be those of you, the young people, that are going to make that change possible. And so I'm very grateful for you to come out here tonight to sort of learn about what's happening and hopefully be willing to integrate this into all your artistic beauty. So I have been organizing since mid-70s. And a lot of this work over the years has been really just about how to take public space, how to transform it, how to occupy it, how to liberate it, how to move through it. And it's that art of taking public space that is, because I don't ever think of myself as an artist. I'm an organizer, I'm a street girl, I train people. But when I look at what happens when people come together in the street, it is works of art. And it is this incredible expression and creativity and imagination that we can bring to space to think about what does this want, how do we feel it, what do we communicate, that is critical to the resistance that is necessary to transform the world. You know, part of the problem I've seen in the 30, 40 years that I've done this, though, this concept of public space and our right to assemble in it, is becoming more and more eroded, and there's less and less space. If you look back at what the amendment really says, I probably have it here, to put on my glasses, I could read it. In fact, that might be good, but on my glasses. I did. Because I do want to read this one. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. So, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free speech thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or the press, or the right to assemble peacefully, or the right for people to peacefully assemble and to petition Congress for the redress of grievances. You know, if you go on further, there's a bunch of exemptions to that amendment that are created. Hate speech, copyrighted speech, all these limitations. But I didn't see anywhere in the Constitution where it says you have the right to assemble only if you have a permit. Only if you can provide insurance policies. Only if you rent security guards or off-duty cops to cover the event. Right? The right to assemble has been wrapped up into the new, let me say this differently. The very rights that they give us, right, are being turned against us and are being taken away again. So over the past 30 years, with the rise of neoliberalism, these more sort of global capitalist policies, we've seen several things happen. The privatization of the commons, as I said, less and less public space. We've seen the rise of a police state beyond anything we've seen before. Believe me, every movement, every generation has seen repression, resistance, violence after this being killed. But they have a whole new realm of toys that they use, or weapons they use against us. The third thing that's really different in this last period is the rise of the prison industrial complex, the privatization of prisons, the expansion of detention centers. And what we see again and again is the fabric of our society is being woven into a thing where we are all in serious trouble. I look back at the past 10 years in particular with the World Trade Organization, which was one of those moments where protests went around the world and this incredible global uprising continued, which is continuing today. And we saw there not only tear gas canisters and pepper spray, but a whole array of projectiles, armament, weapons. And you can watch right after that, not long after that, with 911, right? Patriot Act, Homeland Security. And I've seen over these past 10 years the ways in which the security state has been practicing and evolving ways to take away these rights. I don't know how many people remember that the G8 met in Brunswick, Georgia, and they declared it a state of emergency and actually brought in 20,000 military in the form of domestic occupation in a town of 15,000 primarily black poor people. They had Hummers going through the streets. I don't know how many of you remember in 2004 at the RNC in New York City, when they set up Guantanamo on the Hudson and literally picked up thousands of us on the streets and put us in cage in a bus depot, practicing domestic internment. I don't know how many people paid attention to the RNC more recently, where we see more and more government agents infiltrating. We've known for years infiltrating groups, COINTELPRO, but peace groups, and in this era in particular, targeting more and more people and setting them up for acts that they would never do on their own. And we have to ask, why is all of this happening? Sure, it's a form of social control and trying to make sure that the 1%, keep us all compliant so that they can continue to reap the benefits and we just suffer with the crumbs. But despite all of that weaponry and violence against us, because this is really incredible violence against us, I didn't have time to get the slideshow together, but we tried to pull pictures, because I think unless some of you have been to some of these things, it's hard to imagine what we really face. But despite all of that, there has been incredible beauty and acts of resistance. And that's really where I have focused my work over the years, is working with people who make a decision that they're no longer willing to tolerate the systems of injustice and oppression, and are tired of living in a culture of death, and have said, you know what? We need to be alive. We need to, and then we need to be able to have a culture of life and community and cooperation. And we have seen that growing more and more. We've seen it through the global justice movement, despite the resistance and despite the violence. And I think this most recently with the Arab Spring, the Wisconsin wave, we've seen it go to a whole new level, beyond political networks that run globally, to the fact that every single individual has said in many different places, whether it be Tunisia or Egypt or Wisconsin or Occupy, I am not going along with this anymore. And the first tool, next to our voice and free speech, is our right to assemble. And that's what Occupy did. We're not waiting for permits, we're not asking permission. We're going to occupy this space for the purpose of direct democracy and building community, and to model that, in fact, another world is happening right now in this very moment. We couldn't do that without this notion of the right to assemble. Let me just say, sort of beginning to wrap up a little bit here, that when this repression comes against us, it's actually critical that we fight back. And legal fight back is one of the most effective ways we have. We have a society based in law. But really, when you're in the streets exercising your rights, the laws don't matter. the police do whatever they can do and they worry about the lawsuits later. And we watch them raid encampments, we watch them set up people on Trump charges. But when our lawyers and our legal allies come to our aid and realize that we actually have to push back on this stuff, it's a critical part of our work, we can make a difference. And in fact, it was the lawyers in LA, the ACLU in fact, in Los Angeles, the Democratic Convention, that did push back and we got injunctions against them from raiding our spaces. We actually changed the permitting process for good, and we actually won the right to be in sight and sound of the people we have a grievance with at the Staples Center. And we would have never won that unless we had a legal team working hand in hand with activists to demand our rights that we know we have. So we have to exercise these. And what we have to understand is that they will do everything they can to stop us. And their most powerful weapon, short of shooting us, which they do, is the fear that they create. And so what I want to say to you is that we have to understand that this fear can demobilize us and retract us and can take us away from everything that is beautiful and that we love and what we care about. And that is where I wanted to say the art comes back into the work. Because as we build and as we assemble and as we occupy and as we exercise our rights, if we consciously work to bring in those things that sustain us and affirm life and make sure that every single individual can have their needs met and that we build structures where real democracy can take place, and we focus on the openings, the cracks in the concrete, the space between the police, and the spaces that we can sit and commune, we are building that new world. And I have tremendous, tremendous, tremendous hope for what's ahead. I just came back from the Occupy anniversary. Incredibly extraordinary what people did in the streets, despite the police tactics of going onto sidewalks, grabbing people and arresting them for being on sidewalks. That's right, it is no longer safe to walk on a sidewalk unless you're part of the 1%. That's what they said to us. The sidewalks in Wall Street are for the people that work on Wall Street. I don't know that law, right? So forget all the time what the law says. Understand you have rights. Understand that without bringing our beauty, our art to fill the space around us, we don't have much hope because it will just get closed and closed and closed. So rise up, occupy, fight back. All day, all week, occupy Wall Street. Actually, the chant I wanted to do is whose streets? Our streets. Whose streets? Our streets. Because the streets are actually still part of the public commons, and they're a vital space. So let's remember we can fill them every day with our beauty and our art. Thank you very much.
So we're going to hear next from an artist who creates and disseminates counter-cartography, that is, mappings that produce new understandings of social and political issues. Working with the shared spaces between art and cultural geography, she connects the quote-unquote real history and quote-unquote collective imaginary about specific places to larger narratives about globalization. She has mapped public parks in Los Angeles. She's mapped future territorial disputes in the Arctic and wastewater economies in New York City. She is co-editor of the book / map collection, An Atlas of Radical Cartography, and co-curator of the traveling exhibition, An Atlas. Please help me welcome Lize Mogel.
So I'm an artist, and in my work I use mapping to think about political and politicized geographies at a number of scales. But tonight I want to begin to unpack the politics of public space in regards to freedom of assembly and lay out just one aspect of many of a geography of protest. Freedom of assembly happens in public space, and that public space is defined by the courts, some say too narrowly, under what's called public forum doctrine. Now, I'm not a legal scholar, so I won't go into details, but really briefly, it puts forward several types of public or marginally public space where people can assemble or not. Whoops, I think I'm missing something here. Nope. Anyway, sorry, technical difficulty. So public space, however, is more important than just the right to assemble. Community planner John Byron calls public space an equity strategy. Think about that for a second. I agree with that completely, especially in the case of parks or other gathering spaces. The origins of public space as we know it in this country is with the term commons, which was a shared piece of land. But the larger idea of the commons has really pervaded a lot of activist and protest movements, especially Occupy, and as well as academia and art practices over the last couple of years. Public space, though, is still a commons, although we may not feel that so often these days. If you want to physically define public space, it generally includes streets, sidewalks, park squares, other kinds of gathering places that are owned and maintained by government and, administrated by government and set aside or maintained for public use. Some of these spaces you mostly pass through, as in the streets, and some you stay for a while. As shared space, though, where diverse people interact and must accommodate each other, it's a negotiation, legally, bureaucratically, and socially. I think, though, we mostly take public space for granted. Its existence is, we only question its existence when, for example, it's occupied. The artist and architect Vito Acconci says it best, I think, in a quote from his essay, Public Space in Private Time, from 1990. Public space is an old habit. The words public space are deceptive. When I hear the words, when I say the words, I'm forced to have an image of a physical place I can point to and be in. I should be thinking only of a condition, but instead, I imagine an architectural type. Public space, I assume, without thinking about it, is a place where the public gathers. The public gathers in two kinds of spaces. The first is a space that is public, a place where the public gathers because it has a right to the place. The second is a place that is made public, a place where the public gathers precisely because it doesn't have a right, a place made public by force. And I would add to this that a place can also be made private by force. So obviously we're here today to talk about Occupy, and possibly also to say a few words about Zuccotti Park, which was the physical and symbolic center of Occupy Wall Street. Also the many other public spaces that have been and still are important sites of protest and dissent in the past year. One of the many reasons that Occupy Wall Street is important is because it pinpointed the fact that we can no longer take public space for granted, that our right to assembling and speaking out in public, and even our right to be a public, has to be defended. In the example of Zuccotti Park, which I would say is a public space that was made more public by force, the territorial struggle around it was played out with people's bodies, with policy, and also with architecture. Zuccotti, which is a privately owned public space, or POPs, by law has to be accessible 24/7 to the public. And that's actually different in New York City than city-owned public spaces like parks, which actually can have closing hours. And just a little anecdote, after evicting protesters in November last year, the New York City Police Department put up a ring of barricades around the park, which pretty much limited access to it. In December of last year, a group of people led by Paula Siegel of the National Lawyers Guild, the New York Civil Liberties Union, and Killian Miano of Rome Space created a campaign to occupy DOB, the Department of Buildings. The two legal organizations wrote letters, and Rome Space organized over 100 people to make official complaints to the Department of Buildings that the NYPD was breaking the city's own zoning rules governing POPs and hindering access. And so just under a month later, the barricades were removed. This action made visible some of the codes that regulate public space and keep it actually public, and made sure that they were enforced. So this is a kind of a happy ending to similar stories. There are a lot of similar stories, however, where public space and public speech have been severely limited. And so in thinking about this discussion tonight, I began to look at typologies of space and how their public natures are encouraged or eroded. One of these typologies is the protest zone, or the free speech zone, as the powers that be ironically like to call it, where there has been an inexorable push further and further back of political speech from its object, an object of protest. This kind of space actually has absolute dimensions that can be measured. So let's start with 8 feet. And some of the constitutional holders in the audience might get this already. 8 feet was the distance set in 2000 by a Supreme Court case called Hill versus Colorado. And 8 feet described a bubble of protected space around a woman who was entering a health clinic, protecting her from physical contact and sometimes violent speech acts by anti-abortion protesters. Hill versus Colorado was one of many laws that helped legalize personal space and kind of underscore the right to be left alone. And it described the right to privacy in public space, rights that were previously mostly available only in private space. And just like a side note, this kind of bubble was also called into play to regulate panhandling and begging in public and electioneering around polling places, so it's got some interesting background. But 8 feet is a relatively small dimension, so let's scale it out a bit. That's bigger, 260 yards. In Los Angeles, during the 2000 Democratic National Convention, 185 acres around the Staples Center arena became a secured zone. An official demonstration area was placed in this zone 260 yards from the convention site. This was challenged in court. Maybe Lisa had something to do with this. And invalidated. So the protest zone was moved to a parking lot that was right across the street from the arena. Nevertheless, the official demonstration area was fenced in and had limited access points, and people were pretty wary of it for good reason as things later played out. 300 feet by 90 feet. This is the size of the protest cage constructed for the 2004 Democratic National Convention in Boston. National conventions love, political conventions love free speech zones. So 300 feet by 90 feet, it was surrounded by an 8-foot-high chain-link fence with an overhead. It had room for only 1,000 protesters, and for a convention that is not a lot. That's twice the number of people in this room. Even though the city promised to provide space for 4 times that number. A half mile. 2003, Augusta, Georgia. During the Masters Golf Tournament, the National Council of Women's Organizations protested the sexist and exclusionary practices of the Augusta National Golf Club, which at the time was men only and just changed its policy. The protesters wanted to demonstrate at the golf club's front entrance, makes a lot of sense, but instead were forced to assemble in a protest zone that was half a mile away. Another one, 25 blocks. 25 blocks in Seattle were designated as a limited curfew zone during the anti-globalization protests around the World Trade Organization meeting in 1999. This was basically a no-protest zone, and it was created as demonstrations against the WTO went on and couldn't be controlled by the police, so they basically locked down 25 blocks. Even bigger, 100-plus blocks. And I'm going to give you a quote. "Free speech and peaceable assembly is everyone's right, protected by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Current city and county ordinances allow any individual or group to demonstrate on city sidewalks or county parks at any time, anywhere, without a permit, as long as they aren't closed for security, transportation, or logistical reasons." So this is part of City Code for Charlotte, North Carolina, which in January 2012, just a few months ago, created an extraordinary event zone in order to prepare for the Democratic National Convention, which happened just 2 weeks ago. And this extraordinary event zone also conveniently protected the Bank of America and Duke Energy shareholders meetings. Certain behaviors and items were prohibited from this zone, including, and I'm quoting, "masks or scarves worn with the intent to hide one's identity while committing a crime." Of course, someone forgot to tell the Charlotte City Council that protesting is not a crime. Too small, too few. And this is about campus free speech zones, and I actually asked if there was one on campus, but folks didn't think so. So campus free speech zones, these are spaces on college campuses, school campuses where students are allowed to demonstrate, hand out pamphlets, or conduct other forms of protest, and only in these spaces. These spaces are often very small, and often there are too few of them. Many of these zones in different universities have been challenged, and they've been opened up after complaints and legal challenges. So I'll end here with a question, and after this litany of spatial repression, I'll leave you with this question. How do we create a public space that is truly public? A public space that's liberatory, participatory, and more truly a commons. Thanks.